Today, welcome to I have a very extremely excited about having a super, one of my top favorite guests, and I've been a fan of his for many, many years, super agent, Mr. Leigh Steinberg, who we just finished wrapping, well, Mr. Steinberg did, finish wrapping his famous Super Bowl party, and right now we're going to go into our main subject, which Mr. Steinberg is very passionate about, not only just philanthropy, but the main causes that we're addressing through concussions, pain, and mental health awareness. So basically, my first question is, a lot of people might not know about your background. We know that Jerry Maguire story. We know that, you know, how you're a huge success of all the amazing athletes, #1 draft picks. But can you, when you were at your height, then we ran into a wall. And you could correct me if I'm out of line with the storytelling. And maybe you want to go into what that wall was and where it went from there.
Thank you, Paolo. I had always been able to handle everything in work. I understood there'd be challenges. I understood there'd be reverses. But when my father died of cancer, it really sent me for a loop. And then my 2 kids were diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which is an eye disease that leads to blindness. And then we lost a home in a beach city to mold, and we had to actually knock it down. And then I started to experience some reverses in my marriage. And I felt at the end of it like Gulliver on the beach, tethered down, Lilliputian sticking forks in me. I felt like I couldn't protect my family, I couldn't provide a house, I couldn't protect my father and my brother. And I turned to something to numb it, and it was alcohol. And it was later in life, and the hardest thing is to understand the slippery slope it takes you down, and the fact that it's very hard to break denial, which is I don't have a problem. But I finally got to the point where I wasn't showing up for work a couple days a week, and I hit a bottom. And I got to the point where all I cared about at the end of the day was being sober and being a good father. And so I worked a 12-step program with an unusual, with a unique fellowship, day by day, and next month I'll be 10 years continuously sober.
So you were at the height, and then we had the situation with your father with the disease, so it was a trigger, and then with the diagnosis with your children. So everything came out with you, so it was almost like a car crash.
Yes, it was.
So before that, I mean, you could be a social functional drinker at that point.
Yes.
But it was all of a sudden that emotional and physical pain. I really don't separate it too much.
For example, I had never been a drinker during the day.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I'm moved out from my family. I'm alone in my apartment, and I was able to get a high alcohol level up that I had never had before.
Wow. So was there, did you have a lot of like friends and family trying to come to you and give you hands, or did you know that? Did you say, okay, what was the wake up? Because everyone has their own different experience. Like for me, I was in denial. I said, no, I'm taking what the doctor's giving me.
So at a certain point, I realized that I needed to address this problem, and I gave my agency practice to the younger agents. I actually shut down my home. I went and I was sitting in my deceased father's bedroom, and for a while, the only thing I could think about was where I could find more vodka. And so, but I went off to sober living, where they had no alcohol, and I joined a 12-step program, and at the beginning there was so much wreckage that it was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I've been gifted by a father who is totally optimistic, by a mother who is totally optimistic. I'm the person who, if you walk into a barn filled with defecation, you feel like there's a pony somewhere there. And so it was a matter of proportionality. I wasn't a starving peasant in Darfur. I wasn't named Steinberg in Nazi Germany. I didn't have any real diseases, so what excuse did I have? And so all I really focused on was maintaining sobriety and being a good parent to my kids.
Now, I always find out that sometimes, like, we have jealousy in the world. So you are on top. You're the top agent. Were you finding like your rivals trying to use this disease against you to hurt you, and did that affect you, or you were just so focused on, hey, I want to make a correction. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm a fighter, and that's what it is. Because you did represent fighters as well as basketball, as well as football players.
Rival agents in recruiting always talk trash.
Right.
So that was no different, but just different subjects. And but when I came back, I knew I would have questions to answer, and I don't have a divine right to represent players. So I knew that parents and families would have questions, and so I got ready to answer them.
Now, so the first when you went into recovery, was that, did you have to go multiple times, or were you able to just say the first 12-step program, first recovery unit, you went to sober living? Was that the last drink you had, or did you have a couple relapses?
I had been to rehab a couple times. It just didn't work. The only thing that worked for me was this 12-step program with a unique fellowship. And so, but from March 21st, 2010 till now, I've been continuously sober.
And what is so the treatments, like, what are the main triggers that you found that would really hit you and make you want to go? Would it be stress at work?
Through
your relapse?
As I said, it was not stress at work. It was, I always thought if I worked harder that I could provide for my family, but we lost the home to mold. I always thought I could protect my children, but they had an eye disease leading to blindness. I thought I could be a good son to my father, but he died of cancer. And I took all that on myself and felt helpless and frustrated. Those were the triggers.
Wow. All right, well, we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back and finish up with some other interesting questions. Thank you. So my next question is, what I'm going to try to do is convey to parents and even children about the disease of dependency and addiction, or I hate labels, this disease that we're going in, which I consider a national health crisis, is that I tried to, I came from a sober house where there was no drugs, athletics, jocks, everything, nothing in there. And my father would never, he could never understand how I could fall weak, where, like, through fighting, I could drop 3 weight classes, have that discipline to stay away from the ice box, or football, do the things that we have to do as athletes to be overachiever. But how could I just not put that pill bottle down? And he just couldn't accept it or understand it, no matter how many people and therapists I went. So I know the problems I had speaking to my father, who loved me to death. He's my best friend to this day. Now, when you went through your stuff, maybe you could explain, like, how the transition went through your family and how you went, and did you have to make amends, or did you not have to make amends, or you're making amends today just by living a great life?
Well, my father had died in 2004 before I really became impacted. My mother had a stroke some years ago and is only partially with us. So I didn't have parental reaction to deal with. I had 3 kids, so you needed to explain to them that their father's brain had altered and he was allergic to alcohol. And as long as I didn't drink alcohol, I could be a good father, but my brain had started cravings that became very hard to resist.
Now, so the cravings, to me, like I explained, is at the beginning I took, my drug of choice was the pain medications, so it took away the physical pain. But then I noticed when I had 3 businesses and overwork with stresses and different arguments with me, that same medication numbed that, and it took away that problems. Did the alcohol do that for you?
Sure. For a couple hours, you were not worried about any real issues. You know, you could just sit and watch TV, or I tended to be an isolator.
Right, that's where I was too.
So I would pretty much be by myself while I was drinking, and but sure, you would zone out for a couple hours, and it was easy to get to sleep, and I didn't have to think about the fact I was separated from my family, that I lost my father, that we had to knock the home down, and all the rest of it.
And then, so did you have an actual like Brady Bunch moment of sitting down with your children and saying, "Dad has a disease, this is what I'm working on," or you didn't need to go there?
No, they came to one of the treatments, and so there was a family day, and they carefully explained to my kids exactly what the problem was.
And do you think, like, for the general public, that you would encourage them to do the same thing?
Well, the hard part of it is that I grew up in a home with no alcohol. I never saw my mother take a drink. My father never even drank coffee. And so I had no training in how to drink socially. And for years, I was one beer Steinberg, so it didn't make any difference because it wasn't something that I was abusing. But let me tell you, you can catch up in a hurry. And you don't have to have a genetic predisposition. You don't have to be in a home awash with alcohol. You know, you can drink yourself into alcoholism.
What, and then when you have to, with especially now, I mean, when we spoke over a year ago, you were totally said, "Hey, I wasn't going to start this whole big new agency again." Now you're a bear, and you're coming right back out of the woods with all these great signings and your new draft class, which is congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you.
And it's so exciting. It's motivating to me as an outsider, and hopefully this tape will motivate other people who are hit rock bottom, and now the inspiration comes as you can get yourself out of it. And now, unfortunately, maybe some of us can't, but you've shown us that we can. When you find the triggers now coming through, do you still hit triggers that would make, there's no, like, say, "Hey, wow, you know, I'm at a party, I had this and that," there's no trigger that ever wants you to have a drink?
At the beginning, in the first year, you have to resist cravings, and it can be difficult. After that, the cravings fade away, and we're at a party where lots of alcohol was served, but it doesn't, the presence of alcohol or people drinking has no effect on me anymore. It's just, when I'm dieting, I don't eat pizza. It's less profound, but the point is, it's not my food to eat.
Right.
And so I've consumed a lifetime of alcohol, and that part of my life's done.
So when we were going through the very beginning stages and you had those cravings, what could somebody who's watching today maybe learn? Say, "I was getting this, I watched this great video." What were some of the coping skills you did? I mean, the first thing everyone says is go to a meeting, you know, speak to your sponsor. But did you do anything different that maybe is not in the textbook?
I did exactly what people who had recovered from alcoholism instructed me to do. I didn't intellectualize, I didn't resist, I worked the 12 steps in order with a sponsor who has a sponsor. I turned it over to a higher power in my life. I started to be of service to other people. And I went public with what I'd experienced, because my whole life had been about giving back and role modeling. And if there was anyone else out there struggling, who was worried, struggling, I wanted to give them hope and inspiration. I've never talked much about my alcoholism other than to say the number of days.
Right.
So I don't make any comment about, you know, that I'm recovered or I've got this now. Nothing. It's just because all the times that you're struggling with it and failing, there's a tendency to tell other people, well, this time it's going to be different. Well, this time I've got this. I haven't said a thing in 10 words other than one day at a time.
Now I try to, it's hard because I'm not a doctor, but I am an addict, and I think I will always be an addict till the day I die, right? Whether I'm using or not using. But for the first time, I think within this last year has been since I took, and they told me even with my disease, now the pain doctor said, Paolo, it's like a cancer patient. It's okay if you're on these things. So in my head, I was like, oh my God, it's like somebody, your doctor telling you, you can go to the bar, Leigh, and have a drink today. It doesn't matter anything. And it was almost like an angel and a devil on the shoulder. I was really interested in conflict, but my father and the psychologist I was working with was saying, well, look, if you go on these meds and you go back on that trail and you get back on that roller coaster, you're not going to be able to communicate with Mr. Steinberg and be able to be halfway articulate, because I hear voices in my head as I'm speaking to you now. So if I'm dulling those senses, this conversation is going to be twice as hard. Yeah. So I had to make a choice. So what I'm trying to get to now is that I had to man up, or I don't even like to say man up because it's the women up, power up, is that I had to not be afraid to tell people. And I worked with children. A big part of my business, I placed 524 kids in college, and I was so proud of that, of mentoring kids and getting them in. Don't have a drink at that keg party, do this, do that. I'm not going to be there. I'm not your dad. You want to do it, but this is the things that's going to come with it. So I always kind of like tried to preach them stuff that maybe I didn't do, but I believe that almost like the dry drunk syndrome is that if you don't come out and be open with people and tell them your situation, not that I got to stand on a hill and say, hey, I'm an addict, and I have 5 days clean or I have 5 years clean, but I wanted to, I don't want to feel ashamed, because I was so ashamed by the people I've hurt around me, and that almost made me want to use more, not even for the back pain or the migraines or anything like that. So I started accepting it, and now I'm trying to pass it off to a loved one through my campaign and say, listen, it is a disease. If you had cancer, would you be afraid to tell somebody? I'm not saying you should go on a hill and brag about it, but listen, share what you feel comfortable with. Get the things like you said, get help, ask for help, speak to people that have sobriety. And that's why I think this type of campaign and this show is so important, because I don't have 10 years sober. You did, and now what we learned from you, somebody else could find that way. So that's where I was going with that. So we'll take one more break, and then we'll come right back. So I was just rolling into the dry drunk. People aren't familiar with the term dry drunk, and through your channels, and I don't know, do you sponsor people, or are you too busy, or are you really just stay within your own personal group, or what's your process right now?
Well, because I'm open about it on social media and other places, I have all sorts of people across the country that follow me, but also I get on the phone with and have discussions with. I travel a whole lot, so that makes it difficult to have a lot of sponsors, but I have a national sponsorship, and I speak at different meetings, and I speak at conventions, and I do the rest of that. And again, I'm open, and I say over and over again, which I said from the stage today, if you're out there, if you're hopeless, if you're depressed because of problems with substance, don't lose hope. There are 12-step programs and fellowships of people that will help you. I never would have made it back to building the business we did if I wasn't surrounded by friends, who helped me through the rough times, and not just at a meeting, but in my personal life. So people didn't give up on me, and didn't do this alone. I was the beneficiary of all sorts of helpful and inspirational people. I mean, I got calls from across the country when it became public that I was having problems.
Wow, that's because usually sometimes people aren't that sensitive or in your closed circle, especially if you're writing their paycheck. They say, "Wow, it's about me," you know. So when you went there, did you have to make amends, or you were saying, "All right, I'm coming up front, I'm coming clear"?
Well, part of the 12-step is
I know. That's what I wanted to see.
You have to make a list of the people that you've influenced, and it's a cleansing process that helps. That really has a good impact and effect, because you come clean with those people, and when you get older in life, there are more people. But again, it's cathartic. It gives you. See, I had a father who always told us to apologize if you did something wrong, to run somebody down in the street, that you needed to always be current with how relationships were, and you had a real responsibility to put yourself in other people's heart and mind and see the world the way they see it. So the fact that other people were impacted, yes, I needed to make amends.
What would you give there's no real people that I'm trying to help out there. I said there's really no magic pill to getting rid of this. If there was, I would have taken it, right? You would have taken it. What worked for you, we went over. Do you have any inspirational thoughts, or if you had to tell somebody that maybe they haven't read or done a 12-step program, what they should try?
So the only thing that worked for me at the end of the day was a 12-step program. And by going through the steps, I was able to again become current with other people, and I was able to find a higher power. And so the concept is that you're not responsible for each and every single little aspect of your life, that you've got some help in it. The higher power in a 12-step program doesn't have to be God or a certain religion. It's just some spiritual concept of oneness with the universe, and that was helpful.
Okay. When we last spoke, you were saying that you weren't going to take on any more new clients, and this is what that you talked about. You shared a story that I kept. I keep a journal and all the great discussions, people that motivate me with interesting stories. You told me a great story about how I think it was about Troy Aikman. It was in a playoff game where he got. Maybe you want to share that coming out of your mouth. What happened?
I remember Troy's rookie year. I'm not going to tell that particular story because. But I remember he gets knocked down, and I used to have these players who would get knocked out in football, and I had a crisis of conscience because I felt like we didn't know how many were too many or what the magic number was, and we didn't really understand what the consequences were. It took time to understand that Alzheimer's and a predilection for Parkinson's and chronic traumatic encephalopathy were the consequence of multiple hits. So, and when I saw the players, so the very first concussion conference we did was back in 1994, and I just made sure that the players at least talked to neurologists, because again, I didn't get into the representation of athletes to lead them down the road to dementia. So we've held 14 concussion conferences since then, and are very focused on awareness, prevention, and cure. Some of the fine work that you're doing in this area. And so before our party today, we had a concussion conference
which was outrageous.
People from all across the country sharing their experiences. I think the best hope is that there's a profit motive in developing new technology, in a helmet that actually protects the brain, in not having hitting or in blocking and tackling except during the game, in nutraceuticals that can cure the brain, and a whole series of different products.
was, and I don't want to get sidetracked, but when Jerry Maguire, when Cuba Gooding got hurt, and Tom Cruise runs, is all worried about his player. Was it Cameron Crowe?
Yes.
Did he pull that story from one of your stories?
Well, I'm not going to be specific about what he did, but I told him lots of stories. And he came with me to games. He saw players get hurt. He saw, and that agents have real caring.
Right, and that's probably why players, and you also mentioned that part of your agency is you have a different, it's just not like sign the best player. You want people to also give back to the community, correct?
Paolo, it's the quality of their character. We've asked them to retrace their roots, to go back to the high school, collegiate, and professional community, and become part of programs that enhance the life. A high school scholarship fund, or a church, or Boys and Girls Club, a collegiate scholarship, and then some charitable foundation that deals with an issue that's important to the athlete.
Now, how do you handle this? Like, to me, I don't judge people because I've messed up so many times in my life. If everyone judge me, but I'm always trying to be a better man every day. But like the situation with, and I don't know it personally, with Josh Gordon, what he's going through, it breaks my heart. Where you might speak to an old school coach and say, he's throwing away all this talent. I'm like, well, you don't know what this gentleman's, the shoes he's in. Does that make you as an agent want to embrace an athlete that has that skill set, but also maybe you two could really mentor through? It's just your. So
I don't know
if I'm phrasing that correctly.
I don't think if I'm qualified to deal with recidivism. So the fact that an athlete has one experience where they fall and uses it to learn is one thing, but the first thing I would do with an athlete who's clearly experiencing behavioral problems is you got to get them to break denial and into rehab. In other words, work on the problem. Because going out into a tense, high-powered athletic contest is not probably the best prescription for recovery.
Now, does the NFL reach out to you because you have experience in this subject matter?
No, they have their own drug and treatment program, but very often the problem is that it's more punitive than rehabilitative. So if you're not experiencing problems before you go in the drug program, they can come over to an athlete's house and ask him to test in the middle of a dinner party or any time at all. If you don't call back within a half hour, it's considered a positive test.
So then, all right, and now I'm gonna circle back in where you had your life changing. Now, what made you decide now to open up your second agency, and now you're balancing two. You're balancing your passion of today is the Leigh Super Bowl party, giving back to the cause, awareness, but also bringing an amazing draft class and doing that.
Because I have always understood the power of athletes to be role models. And we can message in a way that permeates the perceptual screen that rebellious adolescents put up against people. They don't want to listen to their parents. They don't want to listen to anyone but an athlete who's big and macho. Lennox Lewis could say, real men don't hit women. And it could do more to permeate the perceptual screen that young people put up than and deliver a message on domestic violence.
Great. One of the questions is once we started getting a little bit of the buzz started coming out about our non-for-profit is, and I have to be careful, is that I'll get kids and former athletes starting to reach out to me for advice, and it's a very fine edge that we have to balance, of course, seek professional help, go through that, but one of the questions that was very interesting that I got, and I don't want to mention the gentleman's name, he played 2 years in the league, but he's home, he's broke, he says he has CTE, all the symptoms, we went through the lines what I'm dealing with, and he says, I can't fill out the paperwork. I can't go through, I don't have health insurance. My neurologist, I'm on Medicaid. I've lost everything, and so I said, okay, well, what do I do? But I'm lucky. I have a support system like your father was there for you. I have my father, who should be in his golden years in the golf course, now is taking care of 2 children who are going to probably pass away before him, and it's guilt on my end. So I'm trying to make him proud on this. So what does an athlete do that? I guess we can't speak for athletes that aren't in the league, where they go for help. But where does somebody that's maybe only played 1 year or college go for that type of, I got to fill out the paperwork to get help, to get in? Because the first 3, I thought I had Alzheimer's, and I wasn't having migraine, seizures, any of the stuff that I have now. And the first neurologist, they sent me for a CAT scan and x-rays. They said, you're fine, and there's nothing wrong with you. And then as we started pursuing more with the I'm blanking on it, the neuro psych exam, and then the MRI, we started seeing the tau plaque, and then I saw a sports psychologist who said, all right, Paolo, you've had 35 concussions we know of. This is what we think, but of course, until there's the autopsy, we won't be able to confirm it. Where does somebody go to get to first base to get that support so they don't feel alone and they're not locking themselves in a room and self-medicating or getting, where you're only one person, I'm only one person. We can't save everybody, but as a community, I think we can, So where can they get that help? Do you know that answer?
Well, if someone's in a league or still employed, there are now programs for concussion problems, mental health problems. There's a relationship in football.
Do you have to play a certain amount of years?
Between the Cleveland Clinic, no. You get health insurance and benefits, but we need more than they have.
Right.
We need more services than they have, and so there's psychologists, special treatment. It may be the brain imbalance of some problems, so you have to treat the whole body.
Okay. I'm going to probably finish off with our final question.
Okay.
Is that with so many different companies and, like you said, the helmets and people coming to you with concussion awareness, it's for prevention. Is there any suggestions that you think that we should be made or in youth that we could start happening? Like I was thinking, one of the parents asked me this question, and they said, would I have done everything over again, knowing what my symptoms were?
So I don't think players should, young people whose brain is in development, do real well with tackle football. So first of all, I think that should be delayed. Second of all,
to what age would you say? Guesstimate.
Certainly high school.
Like 9th grade, when they're about to roll into freshman year ball.
Second of all, we need to think about playing football with no blocking and tackling except in the games, not necessary to hit. Third of all, we need to teach blocking and tackling techniques to young kids in football that don't involve hitting the head. Next, I think we need baseline testing, so at least you have an understanding of where our brain is before it's concussed. Then I think you have to track the number of concussions because, and not just be in denial about them, but you have to track them and at a certain point make that decision no longer, so you play.
Is the protocol in the pros now what they do? I think they limit it on the days of hitting, actual contact, right? But we don't do that in high school and junior high. And I know I was hired to coach 6th grade football, and I quit after 3 weeks because they wanted me to do Oklahoma drills with a 6th grader. And I said, what's the point of doing an Oklahoma if the kid doesn't know form, So, is that... could the high school and junior high follow what the NFL is doing?
No, but the NFL stirs a drink, so they have to be teaching these. If you do play in Pop Warner, they need to be teaching the right techniques early. So by the time someone ever gets to high school or college, they already have that technique, and much less the pros.
Outrageous. So, in closing, is there any events that you got coming up that you'd like to talk about? Do you have any books on the channel that you think that people would be really interested in seeing?
We do concussion conferences every year here, but we're trying to educate the next generation of sports professionals with sports career conferences we do across the country, where if you want to work for a team, a league, a conference, an athletic department, sports marketing, sports branding, sports television, facilities management, you can come to these conferences. If you look to SteinbergSports.com. We also do agent academies where we specifically train people in how to negotiate, how to recruit, and all the rest.
And they learned how tough it is, or what you tell them.
We're honest with them
say,
about
like,
it, but
hey,
they get some real life experience.
Is it like the pros? Is the percentage of being a successful agent just as hard as making it to the pros?
Yes, because the economics can be discouraging.
Discouraging. And where would they find out about your programs that you have there?
By going to SteinbergSports.com, education.
All right. Well, I know it's been a long day for you, and I really appreciate your time and your compassion, and hopefully we can work together in the future.
My pleasure, Paolo.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.